Hello friends, welcome to my channel. This is Charan. In this video tutorial, I will explain in Blazor application how to fetch records from a database using stored procedures. And let's check the final output called SPC. Display fetch the records, the employee table from SQL Server database using stored procedures. This is a table and this is a stored procedure. If you are a first time visitor to my channel, please subscribe to get the latest updates. Before creating a new Blazor application, first we'll check the table in SQL Server Management Studio. The table name is the employee, which contains 4 columns: EMP ID, EMP name, email and salary. Right now this employee table contains only 2 records. And I have created this table in this Charan database. Now my aim is I want to fetch these records, the employee table details, in Blazor application using stored procedures. So first let's create a new stored procedure in this Charan database. To create a stored procedure, notice in this Charan database there is a programmability folder. Expand that one. In this programmability folder there is a subfolder called stored procedures. Select that one, right click the mouse, click new and stored procedure. And here we got our stored procedure with a default code. Now what I'm doing, I'm creating this stored procedure default coding part. Create procedure, EMP SP is my stored procedure name. I'm not adding any parameters here because I want to fetch records, so I require only the select statement. I'm deleting this default select statement. I'm adding my own select statement, select start from. The table name is a employee. Copy that one and paste here. Now let's create this stored procedure. Execute. Command completed successfully. We got a message which means this stored procedure has been created successfully. Let's refresh this stored procedures folder. Right click the mouse. Refresh. See here we got EMP SP stored procedure has been created successfully. Now let's execute the stored procedure. Execute. The stored procedure name is EMP SP column. Let's execute the stored procedure. And after I execute this stored procedure, I got the same table details here. Now let's call this stored procedure in Blazor application. For this video tutorial, I am creating a new Blazor application. Go to File, New, Project. And I am selecting the Blazor app template, click Next. Let's give the project name is stored procedure, display records, display data, SP is a stored procedure, which is my project name. And I want to save this project in this code Blazor folder, which is in the D drive. After that, click create. Then the next step is select the Blazor server app template, click create. And here the project has been created successfully. Let me close this default window. Now first, before adding any coding part in this application, let's check the default output of our Blazor app. I'm running this application and here we got our default output of our Blazor application, which contains the headers, this about link. At this side we got some navigation links: home, counter, fetch data, and this is the razor component. Now first, in this project I will add one navigation link in this side panel. When a user clicks that navigation link, it opens new razor component. On that razor component, I will call the stored procedure to fetch the records from the database. So first let's do that thing to add a navigation link. Stop debugging. Notice in the Solution Explorer, in the project, the shared folder, expand that one. In the shared folder, notice the nav menu.razor component, open that one. Here you can find those navigation links the default navigation links home, counter, fetch data. Now I am adding my new navigation link, one more. Let's give the name called call store procedure, call SP. This is store procedure name, and I am changing the href name also SP. After adding the navigation link, the next step we require the Blazor component, and that Blazor component I am creating in this pages folder. So select the pages folder, right click the mouse, add Blazor component. Let's give the Blazor component is call Blazor. Call store procedure is my Blazor component name. Now when a user clicks this call SP navigation link, I want to render this Blazor component on the browser. So I'm adding the page direct to page between double quotes / I'm adding this SP, the href link name, in this Blazor component. That's it. Now let's check the results. When a user clicks this call SP link, this Blazor component is opening or not. Run this application. So here we got a new output after adding this navigation link call SP. Let's click that one. See here we got the new output, the Blazor component is opening successfully. Now let's write the code to call the store procedure in Blazor application to display records on this Blazor component in this SP. So again switch over to the coding part, stop debugging. Now the next step is when we want to dealing with a particular database, we require that the particular database packages. So here I am using SQL Server with Entity Framework. Before adding those packages to our project, let's expand this dependencies folder first. If you notice in this dependencies folder, there is no any packages folder. So let's add the necessary packages for this project. And select the project name, right click the mouse, manage nudged packages, select that one. After that, choose the browse and search for Microsoft.Entity Framework code. Microsoft.Entity Framework code. This is the package I want to install. Click install. Click OK. Let's accept the license. And here the package is installed successfully. And also notice in this dependencies folder there is a packages folder which contains this Microsoft.Entity Framework code. The version is 5.0.0. The next I want to install this SQL Server. Install. Click OK. I accept. And notice the SQL Server package is also installed successfully. In the last one we require the tools, Microsoft.Entity Framework.tools. Click install. OK. Accept the license. And here the tools package is also installed successfully. After adding these three necessary packages, let's minimize this packages folder as well as dependencies. Now we don't require this config package window, so let's close this one first. After that, I'm adding one new Pogo class in this data folder. The Pogo class which contains only the properties. So in the data folder, right click the mouse, add, and selecting class. The class name is EMP class. And here we got our EMP class. Now in this EMP class, I'm just defining the properties. So first we require to add the key attribute, key alt enter, which gives some suggestions using system.componentModel.data annotations. So we require this namespace for this key attribute. After that, prop double tab, which will create the property. The first property is the integer data type. if we check in our database, we have 4 columns. So I require the 4 properties. The first one is the EMP ID. So let's add that one first. EMP ID. The second property name is a string data type, which is the EMP name, and the third one is a string email, and the last one prop double tap, and the last one is a salary, which is an integer type. So let's add that one, salary. That's it. After adding the properties in this EMP class, next we require the DB context class. So for that, again I am creating a new class in this data folder. Right click the data folder, add class, and this class name I am naming application DB context. And here we got our application DB context class. Now in this application DB context class, I want to inherit the DB context. So here when we want to inherit any class, we need to prefix with colon. Then let's add the DB context. So DB context class belongs to using Microsoft.Entity Framework code namespace. Now we can able to access DB context class. Then the next step, let's create the controller CTOR double tap. Inside this application DB context, I'm adding DB context options, application DB context options colon base options. Now the next step, I'm adding one new virtual property for the DB set, prop double tap. This one is virtual DB set. In this DB set, I'm adding the class called the T type is EMP class, and here the property name here I'm giving property name here is a display EMP records is a property name. Now the next step is we need to connect the database. So to get a proper data source of SQL Server connection string, notice here the Server Explorer, open that one. Data connections, right now it's empty, there is no any database. So let's add a new database in this data connections folder. Right click the data connections, add connection. The data source is Microsoft SQL Server, and the server name is my SQL Server name is this one, desktop. Let's add that one, desktop hyphen tbudeom 0m, and the database name here is the Charan database. The table I have created in this Charan database. Then test connection is succeeded. Okay. And here the Charan database is added successfully, and also notice in the properties there is a connection string which contains the data source. Let's copy this data source and add this data source in our project app settings.json file. Connection strings colon comma my connection column between double quotes. I'm pasting the data source which I have copied. That's it, we have added the connection string in this app settings.json file. Now let's open the startup.cs file. We have to inject the DB context in this startup.cs using Microsoft.Entity Framework code. Come to the bottom, in this configure services, I'm adding a new services DB context. Add DB context. My DB context class name is a application DB context. So add that one, application DB context. Options dot use SQL Server method takes configuration dot get connection string method. This get connection string method takes a string parameter. That string parameter name is, we have to add our connection string name, which is my connection. Copy that one and paste here between double quotes and close with semicolon. This one is double quote. Now after adding the DB context in this configure services in startup.cs file, next we require the services. In Blazor application, everything the coding part will write in the services. So let's add one new folder called services. Right click the mouse, add, the folder name is a services. Now inside this services, I am creating a new class, add class, and the class name is a EMP services. And here we got our EMP services. Now in the services, first I am importing the necessary classes using namespaces, using display data, my application name data folder. Here, now in this class I am adding the protected read only application db context underscore db context colon ct, or let's create the constructor of this class application db context underscore db, then underscore db context dot db context is equals to underscore db. After that, here I am adding a function. In that function I'm calling the store procedure. Public emp class array, the function name I am adding is a get emp details, is a function name. Now in this function I am creating an object for this emp class array, emp class and emp object, then emp object is equals to, let's call the store procedure db context dot, I am adding my this display emp records, display emp records, which is this property name display emp records from this application db context display dot from SQL raw method. The raw SQL method belongs to the namespace using Microsoft .entity framework code. Here between double quotes, let's call the namespace. We have to call this store procedure, copy that one and paste here dot to array method. That's it. And this function return emp object. That's it. Now let's call this function service function in this Razor component, but before that let's add a new necessary classes namespaces display data at using display data.services, and the next we need to inherit owning component base. This owning component base takes a service name. Our service name is the EMP service, so let's add the EMP services. After that, in the code, in this code I'm calling the the function of the service, but before that we need to add the emp class array emp details is the object name. Then I'm adding one new onInitialized method, protected override void onInitialized method. Let's delete this default code, and here I'm adding the emp details is equals to service. I'm calling the service from the function name is get emp details. After that, define a table here. Table border is equals to 1. tr table headers emp employee id. The second table header is the emp name. The next table headers is the email, and the last one is the salary. Then I'm adding the next tr. To fetch the records, we have to use for loop. Now here in this td, now in the second tr, now here in this tr element, I'm adding the table data. That table data we are fetching from the database. So here I'm using for loop. So that for loop I'm adding above at for each variable item in, I'm adding this object name emp details. Let's close this curly bracket after this tr. Now add the tds at item dot emp id. Next td at item dot emp name. The third column name is the email, and the last one is the salary, email dot salary. That's it. Now the final step, we need to add this service emp services in the startup.cs file. In the configure services, I'm adding my service name here, services dot add scoped method. In this add scoped method, I'm adding the key service, which is the emp services. That's it. And this emp services is inside the services folder, so we need to add the namespace here using display dot my application name dot services folder name. That's it. We have done the complete coding part. Now it's time to check the results on the browser. Let's run this application. And let's check the final output called spc. Display fetch the records, the employee table from SQL Server database using stored procedures. This is a table and this is the stored procedure. In this video tutorial, I have explained how to fetch and display records in a Blazor application using stored procedures from SQL Server database. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe my channel.